SIP episode 98. We are discussing the resurgence of Italian varietals in Napa. There's actually a certain winery to thank for it all. Migliavacca Wine Company. They were at the start of Napa Valley wine back in the late 1800s. We discussed this, more Italian varietals, and actually doing it all while sipping Vermentino. This is a fantastic episode. Sit back and enjoy. Tonight, as I said, it's SIP episode 98. Two more before we march on to episode 100, which is going to be a festival for the ages. There will be no petting zoo. That was a bad advertisement by me a couple weeks ago. That has been outlawed by the web. So the animals have all been returned safely. But I want to let you know we're drinking Katie Migliavacca's wine this evening, the Vermentino. For those of you that are new, you can get these wines on the Cellar Angels website. Super, super easy. You go and you acquire a SIP kit. Now, the SIP kit is actually wines that will be available for the next 4 or 5 weeks. And we are doing something in terms of celebration coming up for episode 100, where we are letting you put in your own special bottle. So the nice thing about that is you get to pick your own BYOB, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. Sorry, more technical difficulties. Here we go. So this is your SIP kit. Grab a SIP kit. The BYO, you can pick any other bottle on the website, and it's got a special price that will be applied. A discount will be applied at the time of checkout. And then you can sip and drink along with us and special guests like the two we have this evening. The Vermentino is what we're going to be drinking, but Katie also produces a world-class Sangiovese. And not to mention a few other items that are coming into the portfolio, which we're going to get to. There are only 2 bottles left of the Sangiovese. I would expect them to be gone this evening. So if you're going to grab them quickly. So that's how you get a SIP kit on the Cellar Angels website. And you get to learn and get up close personal access to 2 great people like the 2 we have with us right now. So I will stop talking and introduce tonight's entertainment along with me. Ladies and gentlemen, good friends of the program and great wine people, Katie Migliavacca and Vince Traverso. Hello, Vince and Katie.
Hi.
Hey there.
And I will salute you both for taking time out on a Friday.
Cheers.
We have nothing else to do.
That is tasty. All right, so
I agree.
And it's actually perfect for balmy weather, but we're going to get into kind of the hot weather wine and appeal of Vermentino in a second. But Katie, you may be new to some people, but you are not. The name Migliavacca is not new at all to Napa Valley, and it goes back over 120 plus years. So yeah. Bring Alyssa and Cornyn and some of the folks that are a little bit new. Alyssa, I know you're not new to Cellar Angels. Eileen, tell us about the Migliavacca history in this valley.
So Migliavacca Wine Company is the resurrection of a brand that was created by my great-great-grandfather in 1866. He immigrated from Pavia, Italy in 1857, moved to Napa in 1866, and started the Migliavacca Wine Company. He first owned a store off of Brown Street in downtown Napa, and a few years later, a brick and mortar location was built just down the street where the Napa County Library sits today. He was very successful during his time in business, was one of the largest wine producers in the state of California, won awards all over the world. And with Prohibition, so after he passed away, he passed the business on to his sons. The business was closed in 1919, right, because of Prohibition. And so his sons had other business ventures in their hands and other things. And so they thought, I think they thought that they weren't gonna deal with it anymore. And so after that, since 1919 until 2019, no one had, brought the brand back to life or had attempted to. And so it was a long time dream of mine and goal. And so I was really inspired by Giacomo's story. And 2019, I resurrected the brand with Vincent, my winemaker and business partner.
There's a couple of things before I get to Vince's story that I want to kind of touch on upon your story. So the winery, for all intents and purposes, closed down in 1919 because of Prohibition.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, you're telling me that he was the largest wine producer in Napa Valley and shipping wines all over the world.
He was one of the largest wine producers in the state of California during his time in business. Yeah. So in the late 1800s.
So in the late 1800s, the 1900s or 19 teens before Prohibition, he's shipping wine all over the world and is the largest wine producer in California.
Yes, that's so. He actually said one of his sons, he had 10 children, and one of his sons he sent down to Galveston, Texas to export wine because it was cheaper to export wine from Galveston than the Port of Oakland. So it's pretty wild to think about.
So they would put wine on railroad cars out of Napa down to the port, sail it to Galveston and export out of Galveston?
They would rail it to Galveston.
Oh, rail it to Galveston. Okay.
From on the, I think that was the Santa Fe or the Southern Pacific. And then from there it would ship to Europe by the barrel in a lot of cases. Mostly it was sold by the barrel.
That's incredible to think that this is 1895 shipping wine out of Napa by rail to Galveston for export around the world. And he's the largest wine producer in California. It's just such an incredible testimonial to the family and to the name. And you brought Vince on as a winemaker. Why Vince?
We met very serendipitously, and he's a big history buff and he's really into preservation and he knew how to make wine. We were both in Tahoe and we started talking. He was telling me about a rosé brand that he has, and he had just come back from studying abroad and being abroad for several years, and was telling me about one of the oldest bars in Oakland that he's a part owner of. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this person, I feel like I need to tell the story to this person and see if he's interested in it. And so I had him read an article from the Napa Register that a historian had written about Giacomo, and he read it and we were having coffee and he was like, let's talk about this when we're back in Napa. So
oh, that's super cool. Now, Vince,
it felt like the right fit.
And there's something about serendipity. The Cellar Angels loyalists know we're big believers in positive energy and big believers in the universe working for ways to conspire to help us. We just have to let it. And that's kind of the work that the angels do here at the organization. But the serendipity stuff we love because it makes perfect sense. Vince, you had a previous career and then you got into wine. Talk to us a little bit about the matriculation of that process.
Well, the day we met, which was really kind of a turning point for me, it was March 12th or something of 2015. I had just moved back from Italy a week before, less than a week. It was my first weekend back in the United States. I had been back for visits over the decade or so, that I'd been living abroad. But this was my first weekend landfall back in the States, coming here to live and to work and to make wine. And I met Katie that weekend at this trip to Tahoe that neither of us were really supposed to be on.
We were invited at the last minute the night before.
Yeah.
And yeah, I almost, I was like, I don't think I can swing that. I don't know that I can do that last minute. And I decided to do it. And he was the first person I met.
That is awesome.
And I wasn't sure about what I was going to do. I had in mind, I had worked with Kirk sort of in passing 10 years before. In 2008, I was home from, at that time, Dubai, and tried to work a harvest and was going to work at Venge. And then sort of the stars aligned when I got back. And I've been with Kirk in one capacity or another. I'm sort of his right-hand man for his whole consultancy.
Well, let's educate the audience on who Kirk is.
Kirk Venge is, to me, he's a fellow St. Helena native. He was a few years ahead of me in school. His dad is a very famous winemaker. He was America's first 100-point winemaker for his Groth 1985 Cabernet.
For the record, that was back when 100 points meant something.
Yeah, and it had not been done before.
Right.
Nils in his own right, he makes great wine. He has his whole life. This is a third generation wine family. I didn't know Nils that way at all, though. I knew Nils as the guy that came on our 50 miler in Boy Scouts and wore a weird German hat. And I knew Kirk as a guy that was, a few years ahead of me and in jazz choir and in sports. And it was only when I moved back with my own winemaking credentials, I'd gotten a master's in enology and viticulture from University of Montpellier. It's sort of the French Ag University, kind of their Davis equivalent, I'll call it. It was a dual degree from an Italian university, the University of Verona.
Interesting.
So,
I picked up on the fact that he's really dumb when we first met. So I was like,
Exactly.
this guy, this is the guy. This is the guy.
Holy cow, box of hammers here. I can get him on the cheap.
yeah, I'll do anything.
Yeah, I totally picked up on that. He was the desperate vibe.
Yeah.
So
Shiny thing. I'll see it and I follow it, and that was it. So
Exactly. Katie pounces when the opportunity presents. Good job.
thank
So you spent some time in Italy, and was that work, pleasure, both?
I had studied there years ago in undergrad in Florence, which is where I first became familiar with Chianti and the grape that's really behind that, Sangiovese. The white wine in Tuscany is sort of uninteresting, as it is on most of the Italian coast. They have it. There's not a whole lot of regard for it. It's called Vermentino. You don't see tourists flocking there for the Vermentino, but they do make white wine, and it is quite good. In the north, where I was studying, there's the pockets of Friuli Venezia that does a lot of white wine. This is where you get your Suaves, and they're growing Garganiga. Really beautiful white wines, beautiful sparkling wines. But where I studied was the little pocket of Italy where they do Valpolicella. That's often using the Ripasso method. So they'll have three classifications: your Classico, which is sort of like a red wine, and then a Ripasso, where they run that wine over dried skins, so it acquires this real richness. And then the height of that is their Amarone, which is the grapes are dried completely, and then they make wine out of it.
So I would imagine that there's a cost to Amarone that is probably similar to ice wine. We are not getting a lot of volume, because if you're drying the grapes to raisin status, if you will, for lack of a better term, I mean, when you squeeze those, the juice there's very little there. So
the juice is all but gone.
Yeah.
They'll take that Ripasso wine and then rehydrate, and the grapes that were dried the longest, often for a full season, they'll start making that wine sort of midwinter, January, February, after drying the grapes completely. And losing a fair number of them to all of the pressures that we face when the grapes are on the vine: mildew, rot, those sorts of things.
Amazing. And it's funny because I see John L., who I won't say last names because everyone knows you're not allowed to do that and I get in trouble. Joseph, John L., wine educator, knows all about this. So welcome, John. Welcome, Linda. Welcome, Kathleen. I'm Mission Control is talking to me in my ear and I still can't hear her. So what would you like to say? Oh, John L. was a little bit of my mentor. That is true.
Oh.
So the interesting thing that I find about Italian wines is the classifications. And so I like the pioneering aspect of the Italian wines and the winemakers, because Napa basically, and Katie, I would like you to pick up on this theme, is the Italian Renaissance and developers. The early immigrants were, for the most part, all Italian, coming to, we've talked with other folks about Swiss colony and those sorts of things, and Asti up in that area, but it was basically the Italian immigrants that kind of settled wine country.
Yeah, it's fun to think, we hear so much about mid 1900s up valley. When you go back though and really look at the history, downtown Napa and kind of where that some of the original wine making started. It's fun to look at and see how it's a majorly Italian influence.
It's still holding
part
over.
of the inspiration, of course, the story of my great great grandfather, and the story that I'm very proud of. But just looking back, the roots of Napa and the city of Napa specifically for me, of just that's not always talked about in the history of winemaking here and the story of wine. So.
Well, yeah, I think you can easily make a claim that your great-great-grandfather was one of the quote unquote founding fathers of Napa, specifically the city. And from a winemaking business standpoint, that's an easy argument to make. And I think case closed, largest wine producer in California in the late 1800s. It's pretty impressive from that standpoint. And so you were a little girl walking through the house and looking at black and white pictures on the wall of ancestors and got kind of a sparkle in your eye towards this business.
Yes, so the house I grew up in, we had stacks of photos and original wine labels and logos and great artwork and pictures of Giacomo. And I just felt very inspired by his story from a young age, like, I don't know, maybe 8 years old. And then I remember before I turned 16, my mom would drive me to the St. Helena Library because they had a wine lab, the Napa Wine Library was there. And I would go through old books, and the people at the desk there would make copies of pages for me. And I remember being so just enamored by anytime I came across his name in a book, Giacomo's name in a book, I was even more drawn to, okay, I have to do something about this. And I just remember feeling like, how is it that no one's done anything with this? The family, there weren't, even though he had Giacomo and Madalena, his wife, they had 10 children. There are a lot of Migliavaccas in Texas, but here in Northern California, there are not many family members. So I just thought, if I don't do this, if I don't bring this back to life in Napa, who's gonna do it? I'm not sure. So I felt very compelled. So once I graduated, it was always on my mind through high school. And then after I graduated high school and went to college, during college, I didn't go to school for winemaking, but during college, I thought, I'm gonna bring this back to life in some way. And, obviously wine is the vessel to tell the story. I knew that I needed to find a winemaker, and the hope was that I could find someone who believed in the story as much as I did, or close to as much as I did, and just believed in I think there are so many wines in Napa, brands that have great stories and they have great stories, but more so they have great wine. So the story part, something with soul, something that's original and authentic, that I never would have, and I've told you this before, Martin, I never would have set out to do this if it weren't for the story, and if it weren't for the history, and if it weren't for just the soul of the wine that's very authentic and real. Because Napa is saturated with amazing wines and amazing winemakers and people who have their hands on great fruit, and just, there's a lot out there. So what would differentiate me and make me unique and our brand unique? So the story, wouldn't have done it without that.
No, it's funny. We talk about heroes a lot at Cellar Angels, and it's interesting. You're an absolute perfect wine hero. And for us,
okay, thanks. I'll take it, but I don't know about that.
No, because you're absolutely. And see, most people confuse heroes with Marvel comics and people that wear capes and stuff like that. But many of the loyal Cellar Angels know that it's actually a noun of Greek origin. Vince knows this because Vince is a history buff.
Well, and of course.
Yes. He's going to do the next half of this in speaking Greek.
But I speak Greek. It's ancient Greek, so it's
ancient Greek,
unintelligible to most.
But hero actually comes from the Greek origin, and stoicism is its root. But it's a protector or defender with the strength of two, and you are protecting and defending the Migliavacca wine brand, and it is long since been needed that someone could pick up this mantle and run with it. That is you. So this is why you're a hero. We also
have a lot of great, just a lot of people behind me that have been really encouraging and supportive. And it's a story that's, I'd like to tell, it's a story being told that's still being written. So.
Well, it's absolutely true. And we refer to our Cellar Angels as wine heroes because they're protectors and defenders of the limited production winery. This story is not a mass production story. This is not, an 80,000 case story. That would be boring. Those are boring, quite honestly. But we call these folks sipsters, and they are the ones that are in the chat line right now, not hipsters, but sipsters. But this is totally you and Vince who helped this whole project come to life. So
it wouldn't have happened without Vince. I mean, really, honestly.
Well, frankly, it wouldn't have happened without folks that appreciate it and like the wine. So cheers to you guys for being selective in how you approach what you consume. Wine is something that's all good. It represents good times with friends. We're often drinking it, with good food. And when you add that layer of, where did this wine come from? And every wine comes from somewhere. It tells a story. That's for me the biggest kick I get out of making wine year after year, is that every wine, whether it's one varietal or 10, they're all blends. They're blends of terroir, of technique, and of time. And every time you pop that bottle, you go back to that vintage, you go back to that place. And with Migliavacca wines in particular, we don't get to go just back to that vintage or that place. And in this case, it's the Mahoney Vineyard, just a few miles from here. We get to go back to a history that really tells the story of where we grew up, which is, for me, it's incredible.
I do see someone asked about where the Vermentino is being grown. So the Mahoney Vineyard in Carnera. Sorry to interrupt you, Mike. Martin, I just wanted to, since you just mentioned that, but yeah, not too many. It's very close to where we are sitting right now.
And I will show that. See, that's what you don't know, Katie. And it was very kind of you to answer Jeff's question. What he's really asking, somewhat cloak and daggerish, is when is Martin going to get to Google Earth and show us where this vineyard
is? Already in all caps.
See, it's exactly what he's trying to do. He baited you, but I will forgive you for that.
I shouldn't have this open because it's very distracting. I saw someone say this should be a movie.
Well, Vince,
I only read Greek, so
you are exactly right with regards to telling them the story. And it's funny, we founded the company in 2010, right on the heels of the last great economic implosion. And it was when, a lot of your friends and friends of ours wineries were going and getting picked off for pennies on the dollar and closing their doors. And we said, there's got to be a way to help them. So Cellar Angels was born, and it was born to tell the story, because oftentimes, and Katie and Vince, you're not the exception, you're the rule. These small limited production wineries are not staffed with 20 people in 5 different cities. It's 2 or 3 people that are doing this for the passion. And we are the platform that is going to get them in front of a larger wine loving audience. So this is the stuff.
So much, truly. It's
always been a pleasure.
I can't express to you my gratitude of just taking
don't be silly.
And blasting us out there. Thank you so much, because
and what a badge of honor it is for us too. To be picked up. I mean, it is a sort of a seal of quality. I've seen other people that have been on it, and I'm like, oh, we are in good company.
Good. Well, let's ping pong back and forth, because this is a topic and show about the resurgence of Italian varietals. But I think from a context standpoint, it's nice for people to know, what are we talking about in terms of Italian varietals in Italy and the number of varietals, not Italian varietals, but a number of varietals in Napa. So Napa currently is growing between 36 and 40 grape varieties that are planted. How many does Italy have? And extra credit, name them.
I feel
you can't answer yet.
And I studied there twice, but I feel like I learned about a new Italian varietal that I didn't know about just about every other week or so.
Well, and it's as people are factoring and trying, and no cheating, sipsters. I put those smartphones down. That's the new, pencils down. It's now smartphones down.
Yeah.
And Vince knows this with regards to soil types. We talk a ton about dirt at Cellar Angels, and not social gossip, but actual soil. And the neat thing is, and I'll get to I'm ending that poll. Several folks got it right. But we talk about soil series and subsoils. There are 12 soil orders in the world. Napa has 6 of them. You know how many Italy has? Vince?
Let's guess 10.
Good guess. 10 is correct.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's, and by the way, Vince and I did not collude beforehand.
I just knew that. Yeah.
The
So-
first time
It's the first thing we learn in Italian wine school. They ask us how many soil types, and then we got to name them all, just like the varieties.
Yeah, exactly. That one you're going to be after class a long time. There is an answer in every one of these categories. The correct answer for the number of varieties in Italy is, in fact, 350. So think about that. Napa is currently growing 36. California in totality has just over 100. So that gives you an idea of the types of varieties. And as Vince mentioned earlier, Vermentino is one of the white varieties, not grown in mass production, but one of 350 varieties, which is why when people go to Italy and they stop in these small towns and have these great lunches outside by the garden and in the shade and drinking great wine, it's made right there in the village. It might not be made anywhere else. I mean, it's incredible. I will also go to question number 2, the wine label.
Yep.
So if using an appellation, for example, Oak Knoll AVA, what % of the grapes have to come from that AVA? The answers are either 25%, 75%, 85%, or 100%. Can the people see the other people's answers when they guess?
I haven't been able to see what anybody's guessing, but these are good. These are good questions. From the winemaking perspective, this plays a big part in how we compose final blends.
Interesting.
Because rarely are we making. In the case of this Vermentino, it is 100% of what it is. But oftentimes you have a few other arrows in your quiver when you're composing that final thing. And luckily, there are margins that you get to play with.
So we have, again, answers in every category, 25, 75, 85, and 100. And Vince, if it's going to say the sub or the AVA on it, what % of the grapes have to come from that AVA?
That you have smart listeners here, smart sippers, 85%. Yeah.
All right. I like to see that. The Sipsters, education, don't leave school, stay in school is the old saying. This is what it's all for. I did not stay in school, so I'm glad I'm hosting the show and not answering questions.
An easy way to remember those 3 things so that 85 doesn't just stick out there. The easiest way, and I have to remind myself, is it's the 75, 85, 95 rule. So if it's varietal, it's got to be 75% that varietal. If it's appellated, it's got to be 85% that appellation. If it's vintage, which most of the wines we make are, it's got to be 95% that vintage.
I like it. Context to the quiz questions. Denise is going to, or Mission Control is going to actually start elevating folks to be panelists or hosts so that they can see each other, panelists. And so if you want to have your camera on, that's fine. While she's doing that, to give people a little context of the tropical / remnants of Hurricane Agatha that was hitting Florida today, I will share with you a couple. Mission Control wanted to go out and film a video today of just how windy it was. So we went to downtown Naples and she let me get out of the car and film. So that was fun. And so this is what that looked like.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
It was, that's me. I have a glass of wine in my hand and I went down, didn't spill anything, but it's very, very windy out there. So could not get up.
Wow.
Actually, I'm not.
We're having
really
the same weather right here in Napa Valley, Mark. We totally commiserate. And I see that Michael Andrews, who's actually a way better wine educator than I am or will ever be, he makes the correct point here. There's a nuance on the 95 also for estate designated. If you're going to name, correct, it's the vineyard. So very good, Michael Andrews.
Michael, by the way, was the person in school we called the curve killer.
Yeah. Ruined it for me left and right.
Yeah. All of us that were sitting on the C+ range, Michael came in and actually added another answer in the extra credit AP class, and we suddenly had a D because he ruined the curve. I like that.
He's been, we've actually been working closely the last few years on, and it ties back to actually our relationship, mutual relationship with Kirk and Nils Venge. St. Helena has a very proud scouting tradition and is host to an annual wine auction in support of the district, the council that sort of goes around the Bay Area for the Boy Scouts. And Michael and I work closely sourcing wine for that.
I like it. Very nice. Actually, we did get quite a bit of rain, and it's still raining. I mean, it is a serious rain event. I'm not kidding you. This is a true picture. The other picture was a stolen video from, screen sharing has stopped.
Oh, that was Anderson Cooper. That wasn't you?
No, that was Jim Cantore from CNN during Hurricane Ida.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure I'll get a cease and desist
I
letter from
was
CNN.
gonna say it looked a little heroic. That reminded me of the news footage of the reporter out there, waist deep in water, having to show you what a hurricane looks like.
Yep, that's exactly what they do. I don't know how they draw the short stick for that, but apparently they do. But I can't find the picture I had. But we have currently 4 inches in the last 10 hours of rain, and so it's coming down. And thankfully, it's all sand, and we are in a drought for the most part, so it's a perfect time for that to happen. But I see a lot of pretty faces. Doug's sitting in front of a fire. That is impressive. Looking good. So the resurgence of Italian varietals, we just got done talking about, there's over 350, there's 30 some odd in Napa. And when we show Google Earth a lot, we talk about, Napa Valley and Sonoma being a Mediterranean climate. And when you factor in that only 3% of the globe is a Mediterranean climate, you look at, if you draw the lines around the globe to where Italy is in the Mediterranean, Napa and Sonoma are a little bit further north. So it doesn't seem like Cabernet, the big 6, Cabernet, Pinot, Merlot, Sauv Blanc, Chardonnay, and Riesling should be grown as prevalently as they are. And it seems like people are beginning to recognize that, either A, because of climate change, or B, just from an economic standpoint, a ton of Vermentino is a lot less expensive than a ton of Chardonnay. But what are you attributing, Vince, to kind of this resurgence of, hey, there's an opportunity here in this region, specifically from a Mediterranean climate, to start growing more Mediterranean varietals?
I think it's a push and a pull. I think that producers are getting antsy to do something a little more interesting than like the big 6, as you say. Of course, I mean, most of what I make on a day-to-day basis, year in and year out, is Cabernet. We live in Napa, and we make wonderful Cabernet here in Napa. Migliavacca has a Cabernet in progress. We're excited to release it. It's delicious. But the push factor is that guys like me, who cut our teeth at universities, maybe in other places besides this Mediterranean climate, we experienced other varietals, other winemaking techniques. I dream of making an Amarone style wine here now. I don't know of anybody that's done it, but you want to bring that flavor in and say, you know what, I've been cooking bacon and eggs all these years. I want to try a sausage patty, or I just want to try a different flavor for this meal. If I can use that analogy for winemaking. The pull factor is actually more important, though. It is that I think consumers we'll talk about our American or consumers that for the better part of a half a century, the varietal buy has been the way we approach wine. That was an advent of the 60s and 70s and 80s, when they were trying to figure out how to complex the American palate and get people used to different types of wine that weren't jug this or Chablis that or Claret this, that. And we may be in sort of that post-varietal era where people are maybe interested in the nuances around varietals that are sort of Cabernet-esque. The nuances around varietals that are, oftentimes when we describe this Vermentino, to help people place it in their spectrum, we say, so, if your white wine spectrum runs from Chardonnay to Sauv Blanc, those are the, big and rich and buttery to lean and green and young. Our Vermentino sort of shoots right down the middle. It's a nice one, and that's a nice spectrum to place it. So we're grateful that people are a little bit more adventurous with varietals that they may not know how to say.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, we talked last time about the Sangiovese, and we can talk a little bit about it again when we revisit, excuse me, the uptick in your portfolio. It's kind of expanding, but the Sangiovese is sourced from a special place because of your relationships. And Vince was being very modest with the pedigree of Kirk and Nils, and they're bigger than life from a winemaking standpoint. And Kirk has made so many fantastic wines, and to be able to train with him and study underneath him and work alongside him. And I said this earlier, folks, to Katie and Vincent, with regard to, you're almost like a master chef, or sitting next to Thomas Keller for 10 years and saying, okay, I'm going to get these grapes from this vineyard. And you have these sources. The Vermentino is no different. You talked about the Mahoney Vineyard in Caneros. Tell the story about how this came about.
That was, for anybody that remembers the Sangiovese story, that was sort of out of the beneficence of this relationship that I've had with Kirk, going back years, but sort of being his right-hand man for the better part of the last 6 or 7. The Vermentino, similar. This is our first release of this Napa Valley Vermentino, but I've been working with this wine, and it's been one of my favorites for the most part of a decade. It's never been in this bottle. The worst bottle it was in 2014, when somewhere in Kirk's universe, not every idea is golden. There was the launch of a sub-brand called Marauder. The wines were fantastic. And the Vermentino was a monovarietal Vermentino. It went into this short, stubby bottle. It almost looked like a rum bottle. And it was called Marauder. It was almost like a pirate would have been drinking it. The wine was fantastic, but could not sell it because the packaging was so bad. The guys in the tasting room would offload cases to me at a time because my mother loved it so much. And I just keep coming back for more. So the long story there, short story there is that Vermentino, it lent itself to a few things in Kirk's portfolio. Eventually, they couldn't make business sense out of it anymore. It was maybe competing against the Chardonnay, or it was undercutting the Sauv Blanc. They were launching Croix at the time, and Vermentino was going to fall out of the portfolio. And he had been in that vineyard with his father for decades. Him and his dad. His dad makes it for Saddleback, and Kirk was making it for the Venge vineyard and winery. And Kirk said, call Francis, you can have it. That'd be a great fit for Katie. And so we've been in business now with him for maybe 3-4 years. We share that same block that I've been sampling for a decade. Now, instead of sampling it for Kirk, I sample it and we make it for Migliavacca. It's a very special little plot.
It's a special plot from a special family too.
Yeah,
Francis
it's just incredible. And Katie, what's the case production?
75.
Right. So this is a sales and marketing. Thankfully, Katie worked with on the bottle design and label and packaging versus the Marauder. So
I don't want to get in trouble. Kirk, Marauder, it was a great, we tried it. It was great.
The wine was fantastic, but Katie, talk to us about the nexus
label
of the label, because
Yeah,
there's a lot of important stuff on it.
I'm Jeff and Jane. I'm happy that you're enjoying it. It's my favorite. So the label is actually it's one of the original labels. And it's kind of hard to see. So it's an original label that was created back in the early 1900s. The round medals are from our awards that Giacomo won at various competitions, wine competitions around the world. And the ones in gold are from the Paris Exposition, where he won a gold medal in 1889. He was one of 3 California producers to win a gold medal for his red wine. So
Wow.
Everything I've read, he was most proud of that award. So we made, we made a few edits to the label because we had to legally, but then also just we enhanced those medals because we thought if he's watching from somewhere, it'll make him proud.
Aw, I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah,
And-
thanks. People comment on it all the time that it's how much they like it and how great it is, and I had nothing to do with it. That's the thing. I have all this amazing content that exists that, some brands today are trying to recreate something that looks old and I just have all this great stuff that's really beautiful that is from that time. So I can't take
Incredible.
I don't know who. I've actually tried to find who designed this and who the artist was, but I can't find anything about it. So anyway.
Well, and it's interesting with this vineyard, Kirk, and I'm looking at Kirk. I'm thinking of Kirk Venge and your time there, Vince. But given your training and education in Italy and the different soil structures that we talked about, the different soil series, subsoil series, you go all the way north where you were up near Lombardy and it's very acidic. You go down south near the sea, it's very calcareous, very clay, very sandy. What type of soil does the Vermentino grow in, and why does it thrive so well at the Mahoney Vineyard?
This is on rolling hills of carneros. So you've got these nice clay loamy soils that roll down to the bay. You've got great breezes that are washing over them. So you've got the canopy management. I mean, I know that Francis, he guards his grapes well, and they're well cared for. But carneros can produce, and we know that it produces, world-class Chardonnay and Pinot. Those are the two big things that are mostly grown down here. A lot of great Merlot, actually. People don't recognize. I know Merlot is. I think it's going to have a day again here soon. But look for.
We're trying.
Look for Merlot from carneros. You'll be surprised how good it is. I wouldn't have expected Vermentino necessarily in carneros. Those two are in a natural fit, the soil types and the weather for this varietal. But I think about some of the places that I know that it comes from in Italy. This is, Sardinia and Corsica, these Italian islands that are windswept, clay, loamy, rocky soils. It's what we have here, and so it is a good fit. It also is the grape of, if you have a white wine, at a cafe in Florence, a lot of times if it's sort of the local goods, it will be a Vermentino. They're not making a big deal out of it being a Vermentino. It's like I said before, but that little stretch of Liguria, I won't say quite as far north as Genoa, but down towards sort of Lucca and Pisa, this area, just to the west of Tuscany. That is where this grape sort of thrives.
And that is where Giacomo's wife was from. So she was
okay. Yeah. And Jeff and James,
everything has a little bit of a story.
Absolutely, it should all tie back and be intertwined. Any chance? Well, we talk about portfolio of a sparkling entering into the portfolio.
Oh, did you tell him to ask that?
No, somebody's asking that question right there.
So this last year, I've undertaken my first sparkling.
But sparkling.
Go on.
Not sparkling Vermentino. We can try it, but
that's what they're asking.
I'm a little worried to mess this up.
Yeah, people love it. We can't mess it up.
Actually, and I'll say this about Kirk. He's super excited right now because he cut his teeth in the sparkling house at Mum. That was where, when he was at Davis, where he was grinding his gears outside of his father's umbrella. His first gig was at Mum in their experimental department. And for the first time in 23 vintages, he's making a sparkling. We've got one going at B Cellars. We've got one going for Renneria. And independently, but it happened to be concurrently, I've got a sparkling in process that I'm making for Katie and for another client of mine called Mvina. They're the ones spearheading the project, but we identified a vineyard that I've long wanted to work with up in Anderson Valley. It'll be a Blanc de Blanc, and we have the base wine made. And so we'll look at tirage, probably starting probably right before harvest here.
Outstanding. I'm very, very excited. A lot of sparkling and bubble fans in the Angel Empire. So that'll be a lot of fun. One thing that I think we talked about and touched upon last time was, Katie, kind of the expansion of the portfolio to include a Cabernet. And it's made, correct me if I'm wrong, and both of you can chime in on this, in the super Tuscan format. And we've talked a little bit about the label classifications for California Napa Valley, specifically with the percentages that have to be on there. Same holds true in France with the AOC process. Same holds true in Italy. And I think it's interesting as you go through Italy, you have the VDT, you have the IGT, you have the DOC, and then you have your DOCG. And as you go down that, or I guess you go from wide, the VDT with regards to basically any grape anywhere in Italy can fall into that. It's table wine for the most part, but down to the DOC and DOCG where the quality goes up and up and up and up because the constraints on what you can put into those wines are very, very rigid. And this ties to a little bit of the Antinori family, which is where the Sangiovese is sourced from. But in 1980, the DOCG classification came about legally in Italy. And it required, from a constraint standpoint, winemakers had to produce wines under these governmental guidelines, or they couldn't classify them as such. And it didn't hold for the Antinori family that Cabernet and Sangiovese could be blended. So they said, well, we aren't just going to call it a DOCG then. We're just going to call it a Super Tuscan. And so that's really how the Super Tuscan phenomenon grew in the early 1980s. You fast forward, sprinkle a little wine spectator Robert Parker in there, and things tend to blow up. But you're doing something similar. You have a great source for Sangiovese, again, quite akin to what we talked about with being Kirk's right-hand man. But now you're growing the portfolio, and tell us a little bit about what's coming up next, when that's going to be available, and what we should expect.
So we have a Cabernet, and we want to do a Super Tuscan. So two separate ideas there. Not that's coming. We were going to release our cab later this year, which is really exciting. We had, from the start of this, we wanted to release, just stick to Italian varietals, keep it true to the story, Migliavacca, Giacomo. And then we thought, as Vince has always said, which is very smart, not to be limited to, we only make Italian varietals. So a lot of people will come here to Napa and they want a cab. And so, trying to sell to certain restaurants, I've people will say to me all the time, I'm just not going to be able to sell the Sangiovese because, and we're in some great restaurants, so that's been okay. But I've tried to go to a few steakhouses where they're like, no, it's just not going to sell. So we need a cab. So we want to keep it, we love what we're making right now, but we want to kind of broaden we want to be able to be flexible, right? And so.
And to be honoring of serendipity as well. The only reason we're making a Sangiovese or a Cabernet is because I was wandering out in Etna Springs, which is sort of the northeast reaches of the Napa Valley, up on over the hill north of Pope Valley. And I was on a run checking out some vineyards that we manage out there. And I saw a vineyard up on the hill, and I thought, and I had been doing this because I was looking for more Sangiovese. And I went and knocked on the door, and I had already hit up 3 or 4 places that I saw vineyards that weren't being kept. And I knocked on the door, and they turned out to be old friends of mine that I hadn't connected with in probably 10, 15 years. And I asked about the grapes. It wasn't Sangiovese, it was Cabernet. And they said, well, if you want to farm it, you can take them. And it's a couple of acres. We've gotten a few good crops off of it. The last couple of years have been difficult because that area was epicenter of fires. It is very drought affected. When like last year we had that year. But we've made a few vintages of great Cabernet off that vineyard, and it came into our world. We weren't even really seeking it out. So
no, again, with the serendipity, I love it. And so Katie, as the visionary and putting everything into motion, where do you want to kind of be from a sweet spot of case production for the entire label, for the entire brand?
I don't know that I have a number in mind for the ultimate, this is the amount, that's it, that would be perfect. But I'm looking at maybe like 2,500 cases right now, just not to jump to obviously next year.
What are you at now?
Possible, but 300, 250.
Yeah, 250 to 300 cases. Get it while you can, kids. This is what dreams are made of. And this is a dream in a bottle, actually 5 generations of dreams in a bottle. So I do want to show where Jeff and Jane, they're texting me. They want to see Google Earth so bad. So good stuff. All right. So for those of you that are new, Cellar Angels focuses on one region and one region only, Napa and Sonoma. To us, it is wine's greatest playground. And it is a very, very special place for a lot of the reasons that we were talking about with regards to the soil types, the maritime influence, the Mediterranean climate. And here you have Napa County, and here you have Sonoma County. And here Vince was talking about Caneros, and Caneros is right down in here. It's the only AVA that splits or is divided in between both Napa and Sonoma. Absolutely spot on, extremely cool water right here. Not a lot of body surfing done in the San Pablo Bay without a wetsuit. Very chilly. But Pinot Noir and Chardonnay love it because they're cool climate grapes. So this is where we play, because it's basically wine's greatest playground from a soil standpoint, from a climate standpoint. And it's just an amazing aspect with regards to proximity to maritime influence, geological uplift, volcanic soils, clay, loam, sand, silt. It has just about everything when it has 6 of the 12 soil orders. Pretty impressive area. We talked a little bit about Antinori for the Sangiovese, and it bears repeating its proximity. For those of you that remember, this is Stagecoach, this whole appellation, or not appellation, this whole little beautiful kind of a patchwork quilt, if you will, of fantastic vineyard sources. And also the Sangiovese is sourced from this vineyard because of Vince's relationships with Kirk. And again, you're not going to find this on a store shelf. You just don't get proximity to these types of individuals and relationships there. But more importantly, you are going to want to taste with one or both of these individuals, and it's done or will be done very soon in downtown Napa at the building behind me. So this is going to be something special, and I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too soon. So I'll let Katie tell folks where we are in the process of, hey, soon you'll be able to call or email Martin and or Katie and
call or email Martin, or go on our website and send me an email. We are working on plans to have a tasting room in downtown Napa. That's the old, I don't want to say the ultimate goal as if that's the end of the goal, but that's the only goal. But that's the hope. So the house that you're seeing is Giacomo built that for his family in 1893, and a wonderful family owns it right now. There are businesses inside of it. We are able to go in there, and we have a small office space upstairs. And
just up in that turret, actually, the little dome, that little circle is our office. That's really special. Migliavacca Worldwide Headquarters right there.
Yeah, we have one in Hong Kong too.
It's about 10 square feet.
But the hope is, like, the dream would be to have a tasting room in that building one day. So, and if you want to, visit before that's real, just talk to Martin.
Talk to Martin.
Yeah.
And then I will quickly get Katie and
making all your dreams come true.
Yep.
Martin Cody, everyone.
Was that Mrs. Beasley's B&B in the late 90s?
I don't think so. I
don't think so either. Was someone just nodding their head if they know something different? I don't think it was.
Maybe it was moved in the late 70s. It was falling into decay on the Napa River for decades.
It was blocks away.
And we actually have drawings of it when it was in that state of disrepair. And then it was restored in the 70s, moved to where it is. And we have a great relationship with the current owners. They've been very supportive of this project.
Yeah, so I'm very grateful. for them.
Is there any videos of the actual movement of the house on like a DIY channel?
No, no. But I've seen photos of it lifted.
Yeah,
and
I have pictures of it. I think I've sent you some.
the Napa County
That's
Historical Society
insane that they picked up a house and moved it.
Yeah, thank God. You know, they were going to actually move it to Benicia, and then
It used to be very common. Houses moving around San Francisco, houses moving on riverboats. You know, we live in a different era. It's interesting to me that back in those days, without all of the utility that we have in communication and connection and flights everywhere, but they could ship wine in barrels to Europe in ways that we can't even dream of now, like we were just talking about earlier. Or, you know, moving houses up streets. It happened all the time in San Francisco. A lot of the houses in Napa came from San Francisco, in fact. They were put on a barge and then moved up here.
I'm just so happy that it's still around, because there's a building that hurts my heart every time I think of it. But this building, which that's Giacomo standing in the front there, if you can see it, that sat where, let's see, on First Street in downtown Napa, First Street and Brown, and it was torn down in 73. And people tried to say that it was one of the largest commercial, it was the largest commercial building in the county of Napa outside, besides the CIA, Greystone in St. Helena.
Oh, wow.
So
That's incredible.
yeah, it's unfortunate that they tore it down, but they did. And now it's an empty plaza. But,
Lovely.
yeah.
And so there's a question there. How do we exactly taste these wines? And you actually exactly can go on to Katie's website and shoot her an email or ping us at Cellar Angels. We can get a hold of Katie.
And email it. I can type it into the chat, but katie@migwine.com.
Katie@migwine.com.
Or info@migwine.com, either one.
She is kind enough to not make you spell out Migliavacca.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, that was
Katie,
his idea. He's like,
Mission control all over it. Katie@migwine.com, info@migwine.com. So that is how you taste with Katie and Vince. And that is a tasting that you will not soon forget, because the wines are spectacular. The serendipity is something to behold. And the chemistry of these two and the passion that they bring to this project is exactly what winemaking and the magic of storytelling is all about.
Thank you. It's so fun to see all these people on here. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
Delia, I like the cheers there. So.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Wait, hang on. I was reading lips. Is it Delia or Long Eye? You can.
It's Delia.
Delia. Delia. I promise you, I will get that wrong again.
It's an Italian name, Delia.
By the hundreds,
See,
but yours was given to you in Mexico. So.
Yes, but same pronunciation.
In a small Italian village outside of Cozumel.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the correct pronunciation. We actually do this every week, and we've been doing Cellar Angels, as I said, since 2010. And we have a chance to do things and work that we're proud of for people like you that care. And we actually hope that you tell others about it. We are coming up on SIP episode 100. So we are humbled that you've allowed us to even grace your television screens, your video monitors, or whatever for 98 episodes so far, getting through a pandemic with some of the greatest wine stories and greatest wine people, and arguably the best wine in the world. Can't thank you all enough. Can't thank Katie and Vince enough. So this is, we talk about heroes, and I think we can all agree based upon some recent events that we need more heroes in the world. So thank you for letting us be a part of your Friday evening. Next week, it is going to be episode 99. And by the way, for those of you that don't have, I think, Mission Control, click on that link in the YouTube channel. And if you happen to miss a week, you will get an email notification of the video that we had that week. The 100th episode is coming up. We do not need any more pictures of your wine cellars. Dear Lord, people, you have some impressive wine cellars. I am blown away I think we should make a little road trip and just go around and visit each one in person and help deplete some of the inventory, because that would be spectacular. But if you do want to shoot us an email on what are some of your favorite past episodes, we will be celebrating everything in 2 weeks for SIP episode 100. Next week, we are going to be decoding wine terminology. It's kind of gets geeky. It kind of gets hyperbolic oftentimes when you are sitting there trying to sound esoteric and romantic. And what does it really all mean if something tastes like cat pee? That's a common one that is used for. It's actually not a flattering adjective to have your wine taste like that. Barnyard
It's
fine.
inspired when I hear that.
No, I had a French professor that was this tastes like cat pee pee.
We'll leave you with that.
Awesome. So we're going to be decoding and deciphering all of that. So you will again be an expert. I promise you, you will laugh, you will learn, and you will have a good time. So all of you, thank you so much for spending some of your evening with us. Be good to one another. Kindness never gets old. Drink a bottle of the good stuff. Katie and Vince, you guys are stars. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Really, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Mm.